Lewis Hamilton has just exploded after Ferrari delivered one of the worst weekends of his entire career in Las Vegas. A disastrous qualifying session left him starting 20th, and an unbalanced car forced him to fight through 19 cars for only one painful point. You are about to hear how Hamilton tore into Ferrari for the terrible decisions behind his collapse, and how the McLaren double disqualification added even more chaos to an already unbelievable night. Stay right here, because this moment may be the clearest sign that Hamilton's first year with Ferrari is reaching a breaking point. The Las Vegas weekend fell apart for Hamilton before the race even began because the qualifying session exposed every weakness Ferrari carried into the event. The wet track offered almost no grip, and Ferrari failed to deliver a tire preparation process that could generate the temperature he desperately needed. Each lap he attempted felt like driving on ice, and the car refused to rotate or stabilize through the high-speed corners. When the checkered flag ended the first qualifying stage, Hamilton found himself 20th, a position that turned his entire weekend into a recovery mission. Ferrari had placed him into one of the worst starting points of his entire career. As the grid formed under the bright lights of the Las Vegas Strip, Hamilton's task became instantly clear. He had 19 cars in front of him and a narrow street circuit ahead, one where overtaking required patience, precision, and constant risk. The cold night air made tire warm-up nearly impossible, and the turbulence from a midfield pack further stripped the car of aerodynamic stability. Each corner demanded careful control as he tried to generate heat in the tires while defending against rivals who were also struggling for grip. From the first lap, Hamilton realized that he was fighting a race that Ferrari had compromised before it even started. The early laps showed how heavily track position dictates Las Vegas performance. Cars ahead created a plume of disturbed air that robbed Hamilton of front-end bite and rear traction, forcing him to adopt a defensive driving style rather than an attacking one. The Ferrari worked best in clean air, yet Hamilton spent the majority of his laps trapped behind slower cars that dictated his rhythm. His radio messages reflected growing frustration with the car's balance and with the conditions that prevented him from showing the pace he believed he had. Every attempt to close in on a rival was met with tire slide and loss of temperature, a vicious cycle that limited progress. Ferrari attempted to stabilize the situation by placing Hamilton on a long opening stint. Their goal was to avoid the early pit window and give him space to run laps without interference. However, the midfield remained too tightly packed for that plan to succeed. Hamilton spent too much time in turbulent air, unable to bring the tires into the optimal window that the Ferrari required. When the chance to gain positions appeared, the grip simply was not there. The conservative strategy kept him safe, but removed the possibility of an aggressive undercut that could have broken him free from the pack. It was a plan designed to minimize damage rather than recover points. The middle portion of the race confirmed the depth of Ferrari's problems. After switching to the hard compound, Hamilton struggled for several laps before the tires reached a usable temperature. The cold surface refused to work with him, and the SF25 felt unbalanced whenever he pushed. He reported through the radio that the front axle lacked precision in corner entry, while the rear struggled to deliver traction on exit. These issues prevented him from building momentum through the long straights and made overtakes nearly impossible without taking dangerous risks. By the time the tires stabilized, the leading midfield cars had already extended a gap that Hamilton could no longer close. In the final laps, Hamilton executed a disciplined drive, gaining 10 positions and salvaging 10th place. Yet the single point he earned made the outcome feel even more painful because the performance gap to the cars ahead was shaped almost entirely by qualifying. He finished only 8 seconds behind 9th place, a difference that highlighted how costly Ferrari's early mistakes had been. Leclerc enjoyed a cleaner race and finished 6th, widening the internal gap between the two Ferrari drivers. Hamilton's result reflected a weekend where every stage was defined not by what he lacked as a driver, but by what Ferrari failed to deliver when it mattered most. Hamilton's Las Vegas weekend collapsed the moment qualifying began because the cold, wet conditions exposed every weakness in Ferrari's preparation. The report makes clear that he struggled to find grip from the very first lap, and the tires never reached the temperature window required to generate confidence through the fast corners. The SF25 felt unpredictable, with a front end that refused to rotate and a rear end that stepped out without warning. Ferrari's tire preparation plan did not anticipate how much heat the slick surface would demand. By the end of the session, Hamilton was eliminated in the first qualifying phase and classified 20th. It was the lowest point of his first season with Ferrari, and the moment that defined everything that followed. When the race began, Hamilton faced a near impossible situation. Starting 20th on a street circuit meant he would spend the entire opening phase trapped behind slower cars that dictated his rhythm. The difference between his path and Leclerc's path was dramatic. Leclerc began 9th in clean air with space to manage tire temperature and pace, while Hamilton fought through turbulence that robbed him of stability. Every approach to a corner demanded calculation because the tires slid whenever he pushed too hard. The narrow streets and cold asphalt created a scenario where aggression was punished and patience became his only tool for survival. The data from the early laps confirmed that Hamilton's struggles were not due to lack of pace, but due to the aerodynamic limitations of running behind so many cars. Turbulent air stripped the Ferrari of front-end grip and forced Hamilton to drive defensively to protect tire life. Each overtaking attempt required precise judgment because the car lacked the predictability he needed to commit to aggressive moves. He spent more than half of the race navigating through traffic rather than executing clean laps. That reality shaped his entire evening because the Ferrari's performance advantage only appeared when tires and balance were stable, conditions he could not access until late in the race. Even with these limitations, Hamilton still gained 10 positions through discipline and consistent decision-making. But the cost of starting 20th became clear when the final classification showed he crossed the line only 8 seconds behind 9th place. The single point he earned reflected a recovery drive that did not translate into a meaningful result because the car never reached its true potential in the phases that mattered most. Leclerc's 6th place finish highlighted what the Ferrari could do when it began the race with clean air and a stable rhythm. The internal gap between the two drivers grew once again, not because Hamilton lacked speed, but because his starting position forced him into a compromised race structure. The report also emphasizes the enormous time loss Hamilton suffered while navigating the midfield. By the finish, he trailed race winner Max Verstappen by 59.369 seconds. That gap was not a measure of Ferrari's raw pace, but the cumulative effect of tire warm-up problems, defensive driving, and a race spent battling traffic. Each lap he spent behind slower cars created additional tire degradation and compromised the aerodynamic platform the Ferrari depends upon to generate competitive speed. This combination prevented him from matching Leclerc's rhythm and left him in a position where a single point was the limit of what he could rescue. All of this explains why Hamilton felt so frustrated after the race. The team's preparation errors in qualifying placed him into a scenario he could not overcome no matter how well he drove. The cold surface, the lack of grip, and the chaotic pack ahead of him eliminated the possibility of a strategic breakthrough. Ferrari acknowledged that the result was shaped almost entirely by the qualifying failure and that Hamilton's drive, although disciplined and error-free, was limited by circumstances beyond his control. The Las Vegas Grand Prix became a clear demonstration of how one mistake on Saturday can destroy an entire Sunday. Ferrari entered the Las Vegas weekend expecting to face low grip and falling temperatures, but the severity of those conditions exposed a deeper structural weakness in the SF25. The car requires a precise level of tire warmth to produce front-end bite, and when the track remained cold throughout qualifying and the race, that temperature window became extremely narrow. The report confirms that Hamilton struggled with tire warm-up from the very first lap, especially during the early stints on the medium compound. Without the correct heat, level the car understeered heavily, and Hamilton lacked the confidence to commit to high-speed entries. This limitation created an immediate cascade of problems that Ferrari could not correct during the event. The strategic approach Ferrari adopted was shaped entirely by the tire challenges. The team placed Hamilton on a long opening stint, hoping that extending the run would give him time to climb through the field while avoiding the traffic created by the early pit window. However, the report shows that the cold track made the opening laps extremely difficult for him. Each time he attempted to close in on a rival, the turbulent air stripped the car of front grip, and the tires slid, losing temperature instead of gaining it. Ferrari's plan assumed Hamilton would be able to unlock pace early, but the environmental conditions made that impossible, and he found himself trapped in the midfield with no immediate route forward. The switch to the hard compound tire did not solve the problems because the cold surface again prevented the tires from reaching the ideal temperature range quickly. Hamilton reported through the radio that the front axle lacked precision and that the rear offered little traction when exiting slow corners. These balance issues forced him to drive cautiously rather than push for consecutive fast laps. The report indicates that the SF25 performed far better once the tires stabilized, but Hamilton lost valuable time during the warming phase of the stint. This delay meant that even when he reached a competitive rhythm, there were no clear overtaking opportunities left as the race had already stretched out. Ferrari's strategic choices were further affected by the characteristics of the Las Vegas circuit. The long straights create opportunities for overtaking, but only if the driver can generate strong exits onto those straights. Hamilton lacked the traction required to consistently stay within striking distance of the cars ahead. Each time he closed in, the tires would cool through the heavy braking zones, and the aerodynamic wash from the cars in front destabilized the Ferrari again. These conditions mirrored the problems highlighted in the report, where Hamilton struggled to maintain tire performance while following other cars. The SF25 simply did not deliver the balance necessary for decisive attacking laps under these conditions.